So, who were the Crusaders fighting against? What was the enemy analogous to communism or fascism in World War II that justified the claim that the Crusades were a just war? Well, obviously, famously, it was Islam. Now, it wasn't only exclusively always Islam. There were later Crusades which were directed against pagans in the Baltic, and against heretics in southern France, and against naughty Christian rulers who'd been excommunicated for various offences by the popes elsewhere in Europe. But those are more marginal instances of crusades. We might look at them, but let's look in the first instance at the original antagonist of the crusade, which was Islam. Now, Islam obviously was founded in the 7th century in Arabia. There's a lot of controversy about exactly what the circumstances are in which it was founded. Some of the evidence is quite late. There's a sort of standard account, which is the account given by Muslims themselves. In some ways, it's quite easy to take that account on board entirely as a Christian, in the sense that, on the assumption one doesn't think it was actually the angel Gabriel who appeared to Muhammad, but one thinks it was an angel of a rather different kind from the other side, or one thinks he made it all up. But nevertheless, you don't have to change the narrative that much in order to accept it from a Christian point of view. You just don't think the revelations are authentic. Muhammad didn't actually perform any miracles, apart from apparently ascending into heaven from the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. But as there were no witnesses to that one, we don't really need to take that into account either. In contrast to that, some modern historians want to claim that the early Islamic movement was really quite different, and Muhammad was quite a different person from the person depicted in official Islamic sources. None of that matters very much from the point of view of the Crusades. So I'm going to give you an account of Islam which is based on the accuracy, for the sake of argument, minus the authenticity of the revelation, of a classical account of Islam. So obviously Muhammad is an Arabian alleged prophet from the 7th century. He claims to have encountered the angel Gabriel in a cave outside Mecca. The angel Gabriel says that Christian and Jewish revelation are kind of correct, but really seriously garbled. And so basically the Jews and the Christians have messed up the message which was delivered to them by their authentic prophets over the course of their history. And the angel Gabriel is now going to correct all this to the last of the prophets, Muhammad, and institute the definitive form of religion, which supersedes all the others. And Muhammad is then going to propagate that form of religion, and his followers and successors are going to propagate that form of religion across the entire world until the entire world is turned towards Islam, which means surrender, which is the name of this form of religion, which involves surrendering to God. Okay, so now he denies that our Lord Jesus Christ is God. He does, however, uphold the virgin birth, strangely enough, and he suggests that the covenant with the Jews is now superseded by this covenant with Muhammad and his followers, who are initially a sort of parallel group to the Jews because they're the descendants of Ishmael. So on this account, Ishmael, the elder half-brother of Isaac, received his own form of religion and worship from Abraham, just as Isaac did, but that has been garbled and lost by the Arabs who've fallen into polytheism. That's now all being corrected by Muhammad. Like with Christianity, that Arab ethnic religion is now being universalized for the entire human race, just as in authentic divine revelation, the ethnically based revelation to the Jewish patriarchs is universalized by our Lord Jesus Christ to cover the entire human race. But of course, there is one very significant difference between the way in which Islam is to be propagated and the way in which Christianity is to be propagated. That is, that it is, although Christianity, as we've discussed, accepts the concept of a just war in the circumstances we describe, particularly when it's defensive, and accepts the legitimacy of coercive civil authorities, that the state, Christianity does not permit of the propagation of the Christian revelation by force. Now, you might be surprised by that. I don't know how good your background knowledge is, but because you may know that the Church and Christian and Catholic civil authorities have used force against offenders against the Catholic religion over the course of history. And in fact, the Church does teach that that is intrinsically legitimate when circumstances are appropriate. But the Church has only ever, or Catholic civil authorities with the agreement of the Church, have only ever used force against offenders against Catholic religion when they were already Catholics, who then departed from the Church's discipline. The Church has never permitted the coercion of non-Christians into becoming Catholics. Coercive baptism. Now, coercive baptism has occurred in the course of the Church's history, but it's been conducted by temporal rulers who have been corrected or rebuked by the ecclesiastical authorities at the time. So the Church does not accept coercive baptism. So, Islam is rather different. According to Islam, everybody is already born a Muslim, and they are already sinning by not being Muslims, and therefore there is a inherent mandate for Muslims to, in fact they're supposed to, as part of their religion, to support the principal Muslim ruler, the Caliph, in essentially conquering the entire world and compelling everyone to, if they're not a Christian or a Jew, become a Muslim or die. And if they are a Christian and a Jew, they get a choice between becoming a Muslim or being reduced to a sort of second-class citizen status in which they're a tolerated, disapproved of minority that pays higher taxes in a Muslim society. So that is very different from the Christian conception of things. Christianity established itself through converting vast multitudes of people, while it was a capital offence to be a Christian in the Roman Empire, with such success that eventually they converted the entire Roman Empire. Islam established itself by conquering the Roman Empire and forcing people in the Roman Empire to become Muslims. So, as you can see, that's quite a contrast. Now, this also reflects a difference in internal structure, in that in Christianity, it is not permitted, except in case of necessity, for someone who exercises authority, religious, spiritual authority in the Christian community within the church, to also exercise temporal coercive authority. So there has to be a temporal power and a spiritual power. So the hierarchy of the church, the bishops, headed up by the Pope, exercise supreme spiritual power in the church, and then kings and emperors and presidents and princes and barons and parliaments and congresses exercise temporal authority in the Christian community. And the two are, in a certain sense, kept segregated. That is not that there should be a separation, according to Catholic teaching, between the temporal authority and the church, but that it can't be the same person exercising both. Okay, so Islam propagates itself over a vast area of the world through waging wars. The single spiritual and temporal combined, because there's no distinction in Islam, ruler, the Caliph, the successor of Muhammad, he rules over the Islamic community, the Ummah, and it's his job to wage war and to bring the entire world into subjection to the Quran, and it's the job of all Muslims to assist him in doing so. He's not even allowed to conclude a permanent peace treaty with any non-Muslim power. He's only allowed to conclude a time-limited truce. The world in Islam is divided into the Dar al-Islam, the House of Islam, and the House of War, which is the rest of the human race. And they're called the House of War because it's the job of Muslims and their leader, the Caliph, to wage incessant war against them until they have been subjugated and brought into submission to the Caliphate. Now, what I'm saying to you is somewhat politically incorrect nowadays, but from a historical point of view, it's just elementary. This is clearly how Islam was understood by all Muslims all the way down to the 20th century and, arguably all the way through to the 21st century, but I don't need to comment on whether that's the case or not, and I haven't done the opinion polling to check it out. Of course, one of the big problems in Islam nowadays is that there hasn't been a caliph. Of course, as with most religions, there are disputes as to who is a legitimate caliph or not a legitimate caliph, and at various different times, different claimants to be the caliph of Islam, as you would expect. But from the deposition of the last Turkish sultan in the 1920s by the Turkish nationalist leader Kemal Atatürk, there has been no claimant to be the caliph of Islam, with the exception in recent years of the caliph of ISIS. So from the 1920s until the emergence of ISIS, no one has even claimed to be the Islamic caliph. And of course, the alleged caliph of ISIS is not recognized as caliph by the vast majority of Muslims. So Islam is in a slightly disturbed condition in more recent times because of the fact that a key element in the religion is missing. A bit, like Judaism, which doesn't have the temple. This causes problems with Judaism. Imagine if the Catholic Church didn't have a pope, it would essentially refute Catholicism. So that if the papacy was extinguished as an institution, so obviously that's a big problem for Islam that they don't have a caliph. But they did have caliphs in the time of the First Crusade. So Islam spread over a very large area of the world, gobbled up more than half of the former territory of the Roman Empire, destroyed completely the Persian Empire, and became, one of the great powers on earth over the course of its first centuries of existence. At probably 2 points, certainly 1 point, the armies of Islam were able to push back the armies of the Roman Empire to their capital city of Constantinople, and nearly to capture that city and extinguish the Roman Empire forever. So the greatest Christian power, the Roman Empire, was in very serious trouble in the face of the Islamic threat. And eventually, due to internal divisions in Islam, it was able to reassert itself and fight its way back to controlling the eastern end of the Mediterranean a little bit more. Basically, what's now Turkey and Greece and Bulgaria, those areas, a little bit southern Italy. By the period we're talking about when the First Crusade occurred, the Roman Empire, or as it's called for historical convenience, though wasn't called at the time, the Byzantine Empire, had reasserted itself and controlled those areas by the 11th century, which is when the First Crusade happened. So, why did the First Crusade break out?